In the summer of 195 BC, Chang'an, the founding emperor of the Han Empire breathed his last in Chang'an Palace. He was 62 years old. His Empress Lü Zhi ordered that the news be sealed off. No funeral announcement was to be made. The 46-year-old Empress Lü summoned the minister she trusted most. She said to him, "Now that the emperor is dead, those meritorious officials who followed him in conquering the empire will certainly refuse to obey. Even while the emperor was alive, they harbored resentment and thoughts of rebellion. Now that he is gone, how could they possibly obey a boy emperor? We should keep the death secret for now and kill them all first. Only then can the empire be stabilized." Long before this, Empress Lü had already ceased to be satisfied with the role of a wife. Under her direction, two of the greatest founding heroes, Han Xin and Peng Yue, had been executed. The process was bloody and brutal. One of them was even chopped into meat paste and sent to the other feudal kings. This directly provoked another founding hero, Ying Bu, king of Huainan, into rebellion. In a sense, the emperor's death was also connected to that revolt. He had been forced to lead a campaign in person to suppress it, and during that campaign he was wounded by an arrow again. Now, to preserve the power in her own hands, Empress Lü proposed something that went beyond even the understanding of the minister she trusted most. This minister was in fact a fellow townsman of Liu Bang and Empress Lü. He had risen to prominence by serving and caring for the imperial household. But asking him to kill the founding heroes, many of whom were also from their own hometown, was far beyond the capacity of this civilian official. Yet he had neither the ability nor the courage to change Empress Lü's mind. He knew this woman too well. During the 28 months when she had been captured by the enemy and held as a hostage, he had been by her side. When she finally returned to her husband, only to discover that her place had already been taken by a younger woman, he had also been there. He understood very clearly the ruthless force in this woman, the will to survive and the will to take back everything she believed belonged to her. But to kill all the founding heroes? Was that not too much? Just as he hesitated, another great general heard the news and hurried over. This man was not from their hometown, but he was a founding hero who commanded heavy troops. With clear and penetrating judgment, he gave the minister the resolve he needed. Most of the meritorious officials were outside the capital. To the north, there were 200,000 troops. To the east, there were 100,000. If they heard that you intended to kill the founding officials, they would join forces and attack. Would you not simply be waiting to die? This was the real key. It was not a question of whether they should do it. It was a question of whether they could do it. The minister immediately entered the palace and used this argument to extinguish Empress Lü's mad idea. And so the emperor, whose body had lain in Chang'an Palace for 4 full days, was finally mourned and buried. Empress Lü became the first Empress Dowager in Chinese history. But the road to this position had not been smooth. During the first years after the founding of the Han Empire, she had always lived cautiously, as if walking on thin ice. She used every possible method to protect her own position as empress, and more importantly, her son's position as crown prince, preventing another favored consort and that consort's son from replacing them. At last, under this extreme psychological torment, she had survived until this day. She had survived to to see her son become the second emperor of the empire. He was 16 years old. At this moment, after the political purge personally led by the late emperor, and after 6 years of civil war, the entire empire, except for one minor non-Liu kingdom with very little presence, had become a true realm of the Liu family. The late emperor's eldest son was an illegitimate child born outside marriage and had never had any realistic chance of inheriting the throne. He was now the most powerful feudal king, the King of Qi. The second son, Empress Lü's only son, inherited the throne as the legitimate eldest son. The third son, about 13 years old, was made King of Zhao. His mother was the woman who had taken the emperor's love away from Empress Lü. The fourth son, 8 years old, was made King of Dai. His mother was a low-profile former female captive who had never been favored. The fifth son was 7. The sixth was 6. The seventh was 5. The eighth was 4. Each was made a king. In addition, the emperor's younger brother and nephew were made King of Chu and King of Wu. And the Lü family? Empress Lü's eldest brother had rendered great military service during the Chu-Han struggle, and had died only a few years earlier while suppressing a rebellion on the northern frontier. His 2 sons were granted the rank of Marquis. Empress Lü's second brother had also been among the earliest military commanders to follow the emperor, and he too was a Marquis. And then there was no one else. At the emperor's funeral, the scene was filled with Liu clan relatives, all bearing the titles of kings and marquises. But Empress Lü was not saddened. She sneered. She had finally waited until this day. Not long after the funeral, the woman whom the emperor had loved most was driven out of the palace and sent to the laundry rooms. In fact, at that time, China had experienced only 3 emperors. There was still no formal law or tradition for how to deal with the consorts of a previous emperor. So when Empress Lü sent her former rival away for punishment, many people felt it was improper, but there was no serious opposition. Yet this woman refused to accept her fate. It is said that while washing clothes in the laundry house, she sang, "My son is a king, yet his mother is a slave. All day I pound grain until darkness falls, always living beside death. We are separated by 3,000 li. Who can tell him of my misery?" As a woman from the Chu region, she was said to have been gifted in song and dance, which was why the emperor had loved her so deeply. When she sang this song, it must have been deeply moving. It touched the people around her and eventually reached Empress Lü's ears. Empress Lü was furious. "So you still want to rely on your son to rise again? Just wait." Empress Lü then summoned this favored consort's son, the King of Zhao, to the capital in the emperor's name. Everyone in the empire knew what Empress Lü intended to do. So the Chancellor of Zhao disobeyed the order, claiming that the King of Zhao was ill and refusing Empress Lü's summons. In anger, Empress Lü first summoned this Chancellor to the capital in the emperor's name. Then she pointed at his nose and cursed him. "Do you not know how much I hate that woman? Why are you standing in my way?" After that, Empress Lü summoned the King of Zhao to the capital again. No one dared disobey an imperial edict issued in the emperor's name, except the emperor himself. The emperor knew exactly what his mother intended. He personally went to greet his younger brother and brought him directly into the palace. They ate together and swept together. He hoped to use his own body as a shield in front of his brother, and to use time to wear down his mother's rage. But the emperor underestimated his mother's hatred. Not long afterward, one morning the emperor rose early to go archery practice. His younger brother, being young and fond of sleep, failed to go with him. By the time the emperor returned, his brother had already been forced to drink poisoned wine by men sent by Empress Lü. He was dead. The histories do not record the emperor's state of mind at this moment. It is only said that later he tracked down the man who had carried out Empress Lü's order and had him cut in two at the waist and exposed in the marketplace. After the king of Zhao died, Empress Lü ordered men to gouge out his mother's eyes, smoke her ears until she was deaf, pour medicine down her throat to make her mute, cut off her hands and feet, and throw her into a latrine. She named her the human swine, a human being reduced to the condition of a pig. Empress Lü deliberately ordered eunuchs to take the emperor to see the human swine. When the emperor learned that this was the woman his father had loved most, he wept in grief, fell seriously ill, and sent someone to tell Empress Lü, "This is not something a human being could do. I am the son of the Empress Dowager. I will never again be able to govern the empire." From that point on, he drank every day, indulged in pleasure, abandoned government affairs, and gradually grew ill. But the emperor still underestimated his mother's rage. The death of the king of Zhao was only the beginning. Empress Lü's twisted and fanatical desire for revenge did not stop with the death of that woman and her son. She turned her eyes to her next target, the emperor's eldest brother, the most powerful feudal king. In 193 BC, the emperor's uncle and his eldest brother, two adult feudal kings, came to Chang'an to pay court to the emperor. The emperor was rarely in such good spirits. At a banquet, following family etiquette, the emperor honored his elder brother by giving him the seat of honor. After some polite refusals, the elder brother sat down. This careless gesture enraged Empress Lü. She ordered attendants to bring 2 cups of poisoned wine and place them before the feudal king. Then, in her capacity as Empress Dowager, she demanded that he toast her. The emperor knew this procedure all too well. Just as his unsuspecting elder brother was about to offer the toast, the emperor rushed forward, took up the other cup of wine, and was about to drink with him. Empress Lü was shocked and furious. She sprang to her feet and knocked the cup from the emperor's hand. Now even the dullest person would have understood. The feudal king immediately pretended to be drunk and left the palace. Afterward, he sent people everywhere to make inquiries. Once he confirmed that Empress Lü really intended to take his life, he was terrified. He believed it would be difficult to escape Chang'an alive. At the critical moment, one of his ministers gave him a suggestion. Out of his 73 cities, he should give more than 10 to Empress Lü's daughter, the emperor's own elder sister. To save himself, he immediately did so. He even disregarded normal ethics and ritual propriety, directly honoring this half-sister as Queen Dowager. Now Empress Lü was finally pleased. She ordered a grand banquet to be held at the feudal king's residence. After drinking and celebrating, she allowed this man, who had narrowly escaped death, to return to his fief. After her daughter received more than 10 cities, Empress Lü secured an even greater benefit for her the following year. she made her granddaughter empress. Yes, the emperor married his own niece. That year, the empress was only 10 years old. Even by the standards of ancient China, this was far too young. So several years passed, and the empress did not become pregnant. But perhaps because Empress Lü saw that the emperor was already gravely ill, she decided that the question of succession could wait no longer. She had already arranged her son's entire life. Now she would plan for the next generation. So when she learned that the emperor was about to have a child with one of the palace beauties, she ordered the empress to pretend to be pregnant and then publicly claimed that the child was born to the empress. By an extraordinary coincidence, the child was a boy. A boy born to the empress was naturally the legitimate eldest son. And so this infant, whose exact name would not even be preserved in the histories, was established as crown prince. As for the crown prince's birth mother, she was, unsurprisingly, killed on Empress Lü's orders. Within a few years of this political tragedy, the gentle, weak and sickly emperor died. He was only 23. The child born by the palace beauty was made emperor. His adoptive mother became Empress Dowager. Empress Lü became Grand Empress Dowager. She was 53 years old. It is said that when the emperor died, Empress Lü wept with great sorrow, but shed no tears. Nor did she bury him. The elder statesmen, led by the founding heroes, were deeply alarmed by this political performance. They did not know what Empress Lü was planning. Perhaps they still remembered with fear the great purge she had prepared when the founding emperor died. Perhaps they wanted to stabilize the political situation. Or perhaps they were simply trying to flatter her. In any case, they proposed. The crown prince was too young, and the empire would have to be carried by Empress Lü. Empress Lü stopped crying. Carried? How? Chen Ping, a founding hero who was now serving as chancellor, offered a further suggestion. Let Empress Lü's nephews become generals, enter the palace, and take command of the northern and southern armies. This would ensure that palace security remained firmly in the hands of the Lü family. Then Empress Lü could command the empire in the name of the Grand Empress Dowager. Empress Lü was very satisfied with this political arrangement. And so, once all the political arrangements were settled, the second emperor of the Han Empire was finally buried in his mausoleum. His young son ascended the throne. Empress Lü took charge of the court. 1 month later, the reign title was changed to the first year of Empress Gao. This was the first de facto female ruler in Chinese history. Empress Lü ruled from court and issued decrees in her own name. She not only held supreme power and changed the reign title. Most importantly, all her orders were issued under her own authority. She did not need to borrow the emperor's name, nor did she need to sit behind a curtain in that later half-concealed form known as ruling from behind the screen. She openly and grandly sat in court, received the homage of the officials, and exercised the power of the empire's supreme ruler. This made her fundamentally different from later Empress Dowagers who interfered in politics. And the emperor? At this time, he was only a few years old. To Empress Lü, he was nothing more than a grandson, an expendable political symbol. The empire was completely in her hands. Then she began granting kingships and marquisates on a large scale to the Lü family, of course. Before the formal enfeoffments began, Empress Lü performed a little political theatre. She first made several other sons of the late emperor into kings and marquises. Then she began hinting to the ministers, "The Liu family has gained more kings and marquises. Should it not now be the Lü family's turn?" The ministers, understanding the political wind, immediately submitted proposals. Empress Lü accepted them as if merely following their advice, and began the path of rewarding the Lü clan. Over the next several years, the Lü family received posthumous honors for 3 deceased kings, 5 new feudal kings, and at least 7 marquises. The most controversial of all was the enfeoffment of Empress Lü's own younger sister. She became one of the rare female marquises in Chinese history. This was a sharp slap in the face to all the other marquises. At this time, marquises were either founding heroes or imperial clansmen. Even the Lü kings and marquises were at least descendants of men who had rendered military service. But a woman, if she were not Empress Lü's sister, how could she possibly be made a marquis? Could her achievements really be equal to those of her husband? Her husband was Fan Kuai, the famous founding general and brother-in-law of the founding emperor Liu Bang. Yet no one dared criticize this extraordinary enfeoffment. No one dared object to this woman, who from that point onward entered and left the palace freely and behaved arrogantly at court. Because just 2 years earlier, Empress Lü had killed the emperor too. Yes, Empress Lü killed her own grandson, the young emperor who had been on the throne for only a few years. The reason was that as the young emperor gradually grew older, he learned the truth about his own birth. In childish frankness, he said, "How could the empress kill my mother and then claim me as her own son? I am still young now. When I grow up, I will rebel." Unfortunately, these words reached Empress Lü. Empress Lü immediately sent the emperor to the laundry house and imprisoned him there. She publicly announced that the emperor was ill. Then she began spreading word that the emperor was so gravely ill that he could no longer rule the empire, and that it seemed necessary to choose someone else as emperor. The ministers all said, "Good." So Empress Lü killed the young emperor and selected an even younger grandson to sit on the dragon throne. The ministers asked, "Now that a new emperor has ascended, what should the new reign title be?" A new reign title? The Empress Dowager was displeased. Was the great Han not still under the wise and mighty rule of Empress Lü? Was this not still the 4th year of Empress Gao? Why should the reign title change just because the emperor changed? Was he important? In 181 BC, Empress Lü summoned the new king of Zhao to the capital. This king of Zhao was the 6th son of the emperor. He had originally been made king of Huayang, but after Empress Lü killed the previous king of Zhao, she transferred this prince and made him the new king of Zhao. Then Empress Lü once again performed an astonishing political maneuver. She forced him to marry a younger woman of the Lü family as his queen. In doing so, she forcibly turned this nominal son into a nominal son-in-law. A twisted melon is never sweet. The king of Zhao did not like this Queen Lü. Instead, he fell in love with other consorts. But he forgot, were people named Lü easy to provoke? In anger, this Queen Lü came to Chang'an and accused the king of Zhao of rebellion. She said that when drunk, he had declared, How can the Lü clan be made kings? After the Empress Dowager dies, I will deal with them. How could this be forgiven? Empress Lü immediately summoned the King of Zhao to the capital. But she gave him no chance to explain. She simply sent soldiers to place him under house arrest in his residence in Chang'an, and then gave him no food. Any of his officials who secretly tried to bring him food were arrested and punished. A son of the emperor, a grand feudal king, was starved to death just like that. It is said that before he died of hunger, he sang a song condemning the Lü clan. The song ended with the words, "The Lü clan has destroyed the laws of heaven. I entrust my revenge to heaven." Not long afterward, a solar eclipse occurred in Chang'an. In ancient China, this was an extremely ominous celestial event. Empress Lü was very unhappy. She said to those around her, "Is this because of me?" Perhaps Empress Lü was unhappy, but she was certainly not about to become timid. Celestial warnings were not a serious obstacle to a woman who had already run so far along the road of power. If necessary, she could simply make another member of the Lü family a marquis to turn bad fortune into good luck. Empress Lü ordered that her nephew be made King of Liang. The original King of Liang, the fifth son of the emperor, was transferred and made the new King of Zhao. He was forced to leave his own kingdom and move north to Zhao, and he was unhappy. Empress Lü paid close attention to this. She believed that his unhappiness must come from having no relatives around him. So she ordered him to marry the daughter of one of her Lü nephews as his queen. "You, the former King of Liang, are now marrying the daughter of the current King of Liang. Are you satisfied now?" Could the new King of Zhao possibly be satisfied? The new Queen Lü brought with her a large group of followers, and before long they seized control of the government of Zhao. Then, seemingly inheriting the Lü family's habit of jealous cruelty, she became deeply dissatisfied with the consort whom the King of Zhao loved. But this time, unlike the previous Queen Lü of Zhao, she acted personally. She poisoned the consort herself. The King of Zhao later learned the truth. But what could he do? Strike back? Take revenge? The example of the previous King of Zhao still stood before him. So he composed 4 songs in memory of his beloved consort, and then killed himself to follow her in death. When the news reached Chang'an, Empress Lü was furious. She felt that this King of Zhao had abandoned his family, state, and ancestral temple for the sake of a woman. Such a man was useless. His descendants too should never be kings. So Empress Lü sent an envoy to the 4th son of Liu Bang, the King of Dai, and asked, "Would you like to become the King of Zhao?" The King of Dai immediately replied, "Empress Dowager, we are defending the northern frontier against the Xiongnu. I will remain rooted in this poor and bitter land and guard the border for the state." Seeing that Empress Lü was about to become angry again and perhaps about to kill again, an elderly minister immediately stepped forward and advised her. 3 kings of Zhao have all met with disaster. This shows that none of them was mature enough. Your nephew, the current great general, is the one truly suited to be King of Zhao. Empress Lü was delighted. She felt that this minister understood politics. And so the King of Zhao became a member of the Lü family. Around this same time, the King of Zhao from the early years of the empire, that is, Empress Lü's son-in-law, died. Years earlier, He had been implicated in the grave crime of plotting to murder the emperor. Only because Empress Lü pleaded bitterly for him had his life been spared, though he was demoted to marquis. Compared with the other Liu clan relatives, Empress Lü always felt that this family was truly related to the Lü family. Moreover, several years earlier, Empress Lü's daughter had already died. So Empress Lü made her grandson king of Lü, and made 2 other grandsons marquises. Not long afterward, the youngest son of the emperor, the king of Yan, died. In fact, he had a son born to a concubine. But Empress Lü had long had her eye on Yan, and she sent assassins to kill this prince. She then naturally announced that the king of Yan had no heir and that his kingdom was abolished. 1 month later, Empress Lü made her grandnephew the new king of Yan. The whole process flowed smoothly, in one breath, without the slightest hesitation. This was the year 180 BC, the 8th year of Empress Gao. Let us organize the situation. At this moment, what positions did members of the Lü clan occupy within the empire? First, among the feudal kingdoms, Liang, Zhao, Yan, Lu and Lu were all in the hands of the Lü family. Then there was the central government in Chang'an. Empress Lü's 2 nephews served respectively as Chancellor of State and Great General, commanding the Southern Army and the Northern Army of Chang'an. Beneath them, several other Lü family members, holding the rank of marquis, occupied important administrative and palace military posts. It can be said that the entire military and administrative power of Chang'an was in the hands of the Lü family. In addition, there were many Lü women led by the female marquis. Some were queens, some were wives of powerful ministers. Through another invisible network, they spread over the empire. In sharp contrast, the power of the Liu imperial clan had been pressed down to a minimum. Although the emperor's surname was Liu, he was only 16, and under Empress Lü's pressure, he had no real political strength whatsoever. Even his empress had been chosen for him, unsurprisingly, yet another descendant of the Lü family. Beyond him, among the feudal kings, the Liu clan still had the kings of Chu, Qi, Wu, Dai, Huainan, and Langya. The king of Chu was the emperor's younger brother, already very old. The king of Wu was the emperor's nephew, busy making money by boiling salt. The king of Dai was timid and cautious, unwilling even to go to Zhao. The king of Huainan was an adopted son raised personally by Empress Lü. The only one worth the Lü clan's caution was the king of Qi. Although by this time the king of Qi had already died, Qi, as one of the largest kingdoms east of the passes, possessed the strength to challenge the central government. So Empress Lü was not satisfied with merely cutting away more than 10 cities from Qi. She had forcibly split Qi into 4 parts, inserting into it the Lü family's Lü, the Lü family's Lü, and the half-Lü kingdom of Langya. It is no exaggeration to say that in 180 BC, if this situation had continued, and if Empress Lü had made just a few more precise adjustments to the arrangement of the feudal kingdoms, the empire might no longer have belonged to the Liu family. But history has no if. In the 3rd month of that year, Empress Lü was traveling on a tour of prayer and blessing. While resting at a roadside pavilion, something shaped like a black dog suddenly rushed out from nowhere and slammed hard into her armpit. Then it vanished in an instant. Empress Lü was shocked and ordered divination. The conclusion was that this was the ghost of the murdered king of Zhao causing trouble. A more realistic possibility is that Empress Lü had been bitten by a rabid dog and contracted rabies. Several months later, the disease broke out. China's first female ruler died at the very peak of her power. When this once-in-a-thousand-years strong woman died, an even more dramatic and bloody political spectacle inevitably began. Before her death, Empress Lü warned her nephews, "After I die, do not go to the funeral. You must hold the troops and defend the palace. Do not let those people send you to your own funeral." But her nephews clearly did not possess her political skill. After the news of Empress Lü's death spread, the first to act was Liu Bang's grandson, the current king of Qi. He quickly raised the banner against the Lü clan, issued a proclamation listing the crimes of the Lü family, and began recruiting troops. When the news reached Chang'an, the Lü family was deeply shocked. In the emperor's name, they sent a veteran general of outstanding military achievement to lead 200,000 troops against him. However, after this old general reached the front, he did not fight the Qi army. Instead, he secretly made contact with the king of Qi and said, "The Lü clan is about to collapse. For now, hold your troops and do not move. Wait for me to return and deal with them." The army on the front line had changed sides. Inside Chang'an, a deadly internal struggle had begun. The political arrangement Empress Lü left behind before her death was this. One nephew served as Chancellor of State and controlled the administration. Another nephew served as Supreme General and commanded the Northern Army. The Northern and Southern armies supported each other and firmly controlled the military lifeline of the capital. The Chancellor of State and the Supreme General were cousins. Everything seemed as solid as Mount Tai. But the weakness of the Lü family lay precisely in the fact that Empress Lü herself had been too powerful. While she was alive, she could use her prestige to suppress everyone. Once she died, her nephews had no ability to control the situation. The first to be broken was the Lü nephew, who served as Supreme General and commanded the Northern Army. The man who turned him was his most trusted friend. This man's father was from Empress Lü's hometown and had been one of the earliest elder statesmen to follow the emperor in rebellion. The friend came to the Northern Army camp together with an official in charge of diplomatic and ceremonial affairs. He persuaded the Supreme General to lay down his burden, leave the camp, and go hunting by the Wei River to clear his mind. In a state of extreme anxiety and fear, this Supreme General absurdly agreed. When he left the camp, he took only a few personal guards with him. The news reached Empress Lü's younger sister. This woman, who had been made a female marquis, rushed out of her residence and cursed him furiously. She said that leaving the army at the moment of life and death was the same as handing over military power to others, and that the entire Lü family would soon die without a burial place. The Supreme General was jolted awake by the scolding and wanted to turn back to the camp. But his friend persuaded him again. If he handed over military authority and returned to his fief, he could still enjoy wealth and honor. If he delayed any longer, the consequences would be unimaginable. In extreme exhaustion and fear, this weak Supreme General handed the military tally of the Northern Army to the official in charge of diplomatic affairs whom his friend had brought. The Northern Army consisted of 20,000 elite troops. It was the core armed force of Chang'an. The military tally was the only proof of authority needed to command it. Once the tally was handed over, the Lü family had lost half its life. Meanwhile, at the other end of Chang'an, the other Lü nephew, the one serving as Chancellor of State, knew nothing of all this. He was in the Chancellor's residence discussing affairs with ministers. Suddenly, a blood-covered officer rushed into the hall and reported that the general at the front had betrayed them, reached a secret agreement with the King of Qi, and was preparing to turn back and attack Chang'an. The officer urged the Chancellor of State to immediately lead troops into the palace, seize control of the emperor, and kill the King of Qi's younger brother, who was staying in Chang'an. The Chancellor hesitated because the King of Qi's younger brother was the son-in-law of the Supreme General. The officer desperately reminded him, "That man may have married a Lü woman, but his surname is Liu." As chaos filled the hall, the imperial censor, who had been discussing affairs with them, quietly withdrew. He mounted his carriage, rushed out of the Chancellor's residence, and hurried to inform Chancellor Chen Ping. From youth, this imperial censor had been the closest companion of the late emperor. In the eyes of the Lü family, he carried the label of the Lü faction. But the Lü family forgot one thing. His father had been the second-ranking founding hero of the Han Empire and a former Chancellor of State. In the Chancellor's residence, Chancellor Chen Ping and Grand Commandant Cao Bo had been speaking secretly through the night. Chancellor Chen Ping was a politician famous for schemes. Grand Commandant Cao Bo was a pure soldier. During Empress Lü's 15 years of high-pressure rule, both men had chosen patience and concealment. They had even, intentionally or unintentionally, allowed outsiders to think that there was an irreconcilable conflict between them. But now they had finally waited until the moment to strike. The news brought by the imperial censor confirmed that they could wait no longer. The Chancellor acted decisively. He ordered the Grand Commandant and the King of Qi's younger brother to go at once to the Northern Army camp, seize military authority, and then lead troops back into the palace. The younger brother of the King of Qi proposed that he go turn the Southern Army instead. The Chancellor rejected this. The Southern Army was directly controlled by the Lü family. Going there would mean walking to his death. The Chancellor said that as long as they controlled the Northern Army, they could control the whole situation. But the Grand Commandant faced a fatal problem. Even though he was nominally the Empire's highest military officer, without the military tally, he could not move a single soldier of the Northern Army. The Han Army had a strict system. It recognized the tally, not the person. This was an iron rule inherited from the Qin. The Chancellor told him that he would arrange entry into the Northern Army. The Chancellor also arranged another line of action. He sent the imperial censor to rush into the palace at once, find the palace commandant, and order him to close the palace gates. If the gates could not be held, they should retreat to the main hall, gather the personal guards, and close the hall doors. In any case, the Lü Chancellor must not be allowed to enter the main hall and find the emperor. The imperial censor said that if the Southern Army really attacked the main hall, the few guards there could not possibly hold it. The Chancellor told him, "They do not need to hold it. As long as the Lü family dares order an attack on the Imperial Hall, they will have confirmed the monstrous crime of armed rebellion. At that point, the Lü family will be finished. To ensure that the plan to seize the northern army was foolproof, the Chancellor did one more thing. He led troops into the residence of a founding hero and seized control of the white-haired old general. The same man who, at the very beginning, had come forward to dissuade Empress Lü when she wanted to kill all the founding heroes after Liu Bang's death. The old general's son was the closest friend of the Lü Supreme General. The Chancellor used the old father's life to force the son to complete the final step, lure the Supreme General himself out of the Northern Army camp. This was the real reason why that friend suddenly appeared in the Northern Army camp and successfully persuaded the Supreme General to leave. Not long after the Supreme General left the camp, the Grand Commandant arrived outside the Northern Army camp with the King of Qi's younger brother. But the camp gates were shut tight. The guards drew their bows and loaded their crossbows, shouting that anyone who entered without authorization would be executed. The Grand Commandant's personal guards stepped forward to negotiate, but crossbow bolts struck the ground before their feet. The Grand Commandant personally rode forward, and with the authority of a veteran of 100 battles shouted, "Who dares execute me?" The guards lowered their bows and crossbows, but the gates remained closed. The commandant in charge of the Northern Army stood on the tower. He was very respectful toward the Grand Commandant, but refused to open the gate. Rules were rules. Without an edict and a military tally, he could not allow anyone into the camp. At that moment, the Chancellor's second step took effect. The young director of tallies, another son of a founding hero, arrived. In his hand, he held high the imperial staff that symbolized the emperor's supreme authority, and orally transmitted an edict ordering the transfer of command over the Northern Army. The commandant demanded to see the formal written edict and military tally. The director of tallies overrode him with an unquestionable attitude. "Do you dare suspect that the Son of Heaven's staff is false?" Just as the commandant hesitated, two pieces of news arrived almost simultaneously. First, the Supreme General had suddenly left the camp at noon, and his whereabouts were unknown. Second, an official in charge of diplomatic affairs had delivered the Northern Army tally handed over by the Supreme General. The commandant instantly understood the situation. He immediately ordered the camp gates opened. The Grand Commandant rode into the Northern Army camp, ascended the command platform, raised the military tally, and shouted to the assembled 20,000 soldiers, "Those who support the Lü clan, bear your right arms. Those who support the Liu clan, bear your left arms." Led by the commandant, the entire army tore open the armor over their left arms in unison. The cries of "Long live!" shook the sky. The Northern Army had completely changed hands. The Grand Commandant immediately selected 1,000 elite cavalrymen, placed them under the command of the King of Qi's younger brother, and ordered him to rush into the palace at full speed. Inside Chang'an, the Lü Chancellor of State knew nothing about what had happened in the Northern Army. He finally made up his mind and led his trusted troops toward the palace. At first, things went smoothly. The outermost gate of the palace admitted him directly. But when he approached the second gate before the main hall, he found it tightly shut. The officer guarding the gate, under strict orders from the palace commandant, refused to open it. The Chancellor drew his sword and threatened him. The gate officer was forced to open the gate. Yet when he passed through and reached the square before the main hall, he found the imperial censor leading fully armed personal guards in a desperate defense before the hall doors. The imperial censor pointed at his nose and shouted angrily, "The emperor has issued no edict summoning you into the palace. If you dare bring troops even half a step onto the stairs of the main hall today, it is rebellion." The chancellor did not dare order a forced assault, but he was unwilling to withdraw. And so he remained there with his troops, deadlocked in the square for an entire afternoon. He wasted the final countdown of his life. At dusk, a fierce wind suddenly rose. The King of Qi's younger brother led 1,000 elite northern army cavalrymen storming into the palace square. Facing the northern army elites descending like tigers from the mountain, the southern army under the Lü chancellor scattered and fled in an instant. In extreme terror, the chancellor abandoned his troops and ran in disgrace. In the end, he hid in a toilet in a corner of the palace. The pursuers arrived and drove a sword through his chest. After the chancellor died, the doors of the imperial hall slowly opened. One of the emperor's close attendants came out holding the imperial staff that represented supreme imperial authority, and conveyed the emperor's order to comfort the northern army. This was the political stance finally taken by the 16-year-old emperor. He chose to stand with the coup. From this moment on, the coup was no longer a struggle for power between two factions. It became the state's lawful extermination of the Lü relatives. The King of Qi's younger brother pulled the attendant onto his war chariot. Borrowing the authority of the Son of Heaven's staff, he led troops into the Lü family's main stronghold, Chang'an Palace. The Lü family members responsible for guarding the palace were cut down in the chaos. Beginning from this point, a massacre of the entire Lü clan spun completely out of control under the night sky of Chang'an. Whether powerful ministers, women or children, as long as Lü blood flowed in them, they were mercilessly slaughtered. When dawn came, the supreme general who had surrendered his military authority and fled through the night was dragged into the street and beheaded. Empress Lü's younger sister was beaten to death with clubs. The Grand Commandant immediately sent elite troops out of Chang'an to hunt down and kill the Lü family members scattered in their fiefs. The political edifice the Lü family had built over 15 years collapsed within 24 hours. In 24 hours, the Chancellor and the Grand Commandant completed an unbelievable reversal from a desperate position. Through lies, betrayal, and extreme cold-bloodedness, they purged the empire's tumor. After the Lü family had been completely eliminated, the group of founding heroes and imperial clansmen in Chang'an faced a problem even more difficult than the military coup itself. Who would sit on the now empty dragon throne? The young emperor currently on the throne had been installed by Empress Lü during her lifetime. The founding heroes declared that he was not truly the son of the late emperor, and that the Lü family had falsified his lineage. Since his legitimacy had been denied, he had to be deposed. But once he was deposed, whom should they install? That required careful calculation. The first candidate to emerge was the King of Qi. He was the eldest grandson of the founding emperor, and his father had been the emperor's eldest son. After Empress Lü died, he had been the first to raise troops against the Lü family. Qi was also one of the strongest feudal kingdoms at the time. Whether in bloodline, merit or strength, he had the strongest claim. But an elder member of the imperial clan, Liu Bang's cousin, who was also a son-in-law of the Lü family, stepped forward in time. The reason he gave for opposition was lethal. The maternal family of the King of Qi was no good either. His uncle was a brutal and vicious man. If the King of Qi were chosen as emperor, his mother's family would inevitably become a second Lü clan. These words struck directly at everyone's deepest fear. They had just washed away one family of domineering imperial in-laws with blood. They absolutely could not create another. Even more subtle was the fact that two of the King of Qi's own younger brothers were in Chang'an at this time. One had led the northern army into the palace during the coup and personally killed the Lü chancellor. The other had participated in the entire process of controlling the palace. They had rendered enormous service. But on the question of whether they supported their own elder brother as emperor, both maintained the same silence. The only reasonable explanation is this. Perhaps they believed that betraying their own brother in exchange for greater personal benefit was more worthwhile than supporting him. After the King of Qi was rejected, another candidate entered people's sight. The King of Huainan. He was the youngest son of the founding emperor, and at the time he was 18. But he had a fatal weakness. He had been raised personally by Empress Lü. For this reason alone, the group of founding heroes could not possibly hand the throne to him. Once the two most direct heirs had both been excluded, a name long ignored surfaced. Liu Heng, the King of Dai. He was the fourth son of the founding emperor, and he was 24 years old. This King of Dai had always been a marginal figure among the Han imperial clan. His mother had once been the concubine of an enemy king. After that kingdom was defeated, she was captured and sent into the Han palace. She was once accidentally favored by the emperor and gave birth to him. But she was never loved. For that reason, she never attracted Empress Lü's jealousy. During the dozen or so years in which Empress Lü purged the emperor's harem and the imperial clan, she was one of the very few lucky women who could go with her son to his fief and live far away from Chang'an. In the eyes of the ministers, Liu Heng, King of Dai, had two incomparable advantages. First, his maternal background was so weak it almost did not exist. His mother was of captive origin and had no powerful in-law family to rely on. His only maternal uncle was merely a minor official in Dai who handled miscellaneous affairs. Second, according to various rumors, this King of Dai was benevolent, filial, generous, and mild. He was not ambitious and difficult to control like the King of Qi. For the founding heroes who had just endured 15 years of Empress Lü's high-pressure rule, a gentle, weak, and controllable ruler was exactly the result they most desired. But these reasons could not be openly discussed. So the founding heroes found an impeccable formal justification. The King of Dai was the eldest living son of the founding emperor. The founding emperor Liu Bang had 8 sons. By 180 BC, only 2 remained. Apart from Liu Heng, the 24-year-old King of Dai, there was the 18-year-old King of Huainan. According to the patriarchal principle of seniority, the King of Dai unquestionably held the advantage. And the fact that the King of Huainan had been raised by Empress Lü made it even more impossible for him to be chosen. So, after the ministers reached a consensus, envoys rode out from Chang'an and headed north to the borderland of Dai, summoning the King of Dai to the capital to inherit the throne. But Liu Heng's reaction surprised everyone. Faced with this opportunity to rise to the highest position in a single step, he did not go mad with joy. He did not immediately set out. Instead, he showed a calm and caution far beyond his age. He repeatedly discussed the matter with the officials of Dai, carefully examining the situation in Chang'an and the true intentions of the various factions. In the end, he made an extremely prudent decision. He first sent his maternal uncle, Bo Zhao, to Chang'an. Under the pretext of reporting to the capital, Bo Zhao was to meet the core figures among the founding heroes, investigate the true situation in Chang'an, and test the real attitude of all parties toward Liu Heng's accession. After Bo Zhao reached Chang'an, he held a secret meeting with the Grand Commandant and others. The contents of this meeting are not recorded in the histories. But after Bo Zhao returned from Chang'an to Dai, he reported the situation to the king of Dai. Only after this did the cautious king of Dai finally set out for the capital. When the king of Dai's party arrived in Chang'an, he did not enter the palace directly. Instead, he first stayed at the Dai Kingdom's official residence in Chang'an. The founding heroes and imperial clansmen brought the imperial jade seal to the residence and formally urged him to take the throne. Liu Heng declined several times, according to the political etiquette of the day. After each refusal, the ministers again begged him to accept. This repeated exchange was a common performance in traditional politics. The person being elevated had to display sufficient modesty and reluctance so that he would not appear greedy for power. After several rounds of refusal, Liu Heng finally accepted the jade seal. The list of those urging him to take the throne is deeply meaningful. The Chancellor, the Grand Commandant, the Great General, the Imperial Censor, the Minister of the Imperial Clan, the two younger brothers of the King of Qi who had just rendered great service, and the official who had tricked the Northern Army tally out of the Lü Supreme General. This list covered the founding hero group, the military power faction, and representatives of the Imperial Clan. It was a political decision based on a high degree of consensus. The official wording of their appeal had also been carefully considered. The public explanation they finally produced was this: the current emperor and the other sons of the late emperor are not truly the late emperor's descendants and should not continue to offer sacrifices in the ancestral temple. We have respectfully discussed this repeatedly with elder members of the imperial clan, ministers, marquises, and officials of rank 2,000 bushels and above. Everyone says that your majesty is now the eldest son of Emperor Gao, and is the most suitable person to inherit from Emperor Gao. Proper in name, lawful in form, flawless in argument. But everyone pretended to ignore one problem. On the very same day that Liu Heng accepted the Jade Seal, the King of Qi's younger brother found a founding hero. Xiahou Ying, the legendary charioteer who had once risked his life on the battlefield to rescue the emperor's children. He said to Xiahou Ying, "The two of us did not have time to play much of a role in the coup. Now we can only volunteer to clear the palace for the new emperor." The two men came to the palace and said to the 16-year-old young emperor, "Go out and find somewhere else to live." The young emperor looked at Xiahou Ying, the man who had once saved his father's life, and asked in confusion, "Where are you taking me?" Old Xiahou Ying replied, "Out to find somewhere else to live." Then they disarmed the young emperor's attendants and took him out of the palace in the Son of Heaven's own carriage. The same carriage then proceeded to the Dai residence to welcome Liu Heng into the palace. That night, this young emperor and his brothers, the 4 sons of Liu Heng's deceased second elder brother, were all killed. Together with the slain members of the Lü family, this bloody reckoning finally came to an end. There is one detail here that is especially thought-provoking in the Chinese historical sources. Liu Heng, king of Dai, once had a queen, and with her he had 4 sons. But before he went to Chang'an to take the throne, this queen and all 4 sons died of illness. The histories do not record their names, nor do they record what illness they suffered from. But the histories clearly record another matter. During Empress Lü's domination of politics, she had one fixed political practice: forcing Liu clan feudal kings to marry women of the Lü family as their queens. There are clear records of as many as 7 such cases. What if Liu Heng's queen in Dai was also surnamed Lü? What if, in the secret meeting between the King of Dai's maternal uncle and the Grand Commandant, the question of how to handle this Lü-born queen and her 4 sons was also discussed? The answers to these questions will never appear in any history book. But Liu Heng, king of Dai, eventually walked alone into the imperial palace of Chang'an. Beside him, there was not a single in-law relative who might become a second Lü family. And that unnamed Queen of Dai, along with her 4 sons, vanished completely from history. In 180 BC, Liu Heng, king of Dai, ascended the throne. He became Emperor Wen of Han. Chinese history was about to enter an era of good government that later generations would praise again and again. But before that came 15 full years, from Liu Bang's death to Liu Heng's accession. For 15 years, one woman ruled this empire. Her death triggered a 24-hour coup. In bloodshed, a dynasty completed the transfer of power. But true peace had only just begun.